Okay, so we're going to do the second part of the essay guide. I've put some new stuff onto Edline. You should have read about the Second Great Awakening already and the religious background to the social change. The next thing on the list is you've got to look at the reform groups themselves. All right, so here's your question again. Reform movements in the United States sought to expand democratic ideals. You should have read up and defined democratic ideals. You should have read about the religious background to reforms. In your introduction, you need to basically explain why reforming society is such a big deal. You need to define democratic ideals. And this is kind of going to be key, this point right here. When you're looking at the reform movements, you've got to figure out if some of the reform movements had other motives other than spreading democratic ideals. And if you feel they do, then that's going to change your answer a little bit to the question, did reform movements sought to expand democratic ideals or seek to expand democratic ideals? So one of the things I would do is, as you go ahead and read about the reform movements, I would make a list of the different ones. And I would definitely try to categorize them. And what I mean by that is, after you've read about the different reform movements, can you group them together? If you're reading from your textbook, how does your textbook group them? If you read, I've put it on Edline, a reading from my college textbook, which I actually prefer the Nations reading 1 and 2. I actually prefer that to the textbook, but you can do what you want. How do the Nations book divide them up? I've also put a Foner reading. Some of you know I like Eric Foner. He's a great historian. His reading has a little discussion of the groups. After you've categorized them, what you need to figure out is how you're going to divide up your essay. All right, you're going to have 3 paragraphs, and I've put on a second essay guide onto Edline for you, and you're going to need 3 paragraphs, and you're going to answer, did the stuff you're talking about seek to expand democratic ideals, or did it not? So I'll give you an example. If we're talking, for example, about education, and I'm not saying that should be a paragraph, but let's say that we look at education. So I'm not saying this should be a paragraph. I'm just using it as an example. All right, there are some ways that you can say that education definitely looks to expand democratic ideals. All right, so we have new voters, and they need to be able to read and write. And they need to be of a certain level of intelligence so that they can vote. When we look, though, at education, when we look at, we're going to look at a source, all right, and we'll look at it the next time I see you in class. To some extent, when you put kids in school, you start exercising control over them and what they think. And so what we're going to look at is, like, what were these guys taught? What was the goal of what were they being taught, and what intention did that have? Certainly it had the intention to make them smarter so they could vote, but is there another intention? Now, if you read one of the sources online, The Varying Viewpoints, this is from the old textbook, and it talks in a nutshell. This is your essay in like 1 page, and it talks about some of the issues. And it talks about how some historians, depending on the time period that you're looking at, have found different motivation within some of the reform groups. So this will be a really helpful essay, give you some ideas maybe about how to look at these reform movements, and it might give you some ideas for how to divide up your essay. All right, hope this helps. Thanks.